And here we go. We are live with day 2 of MystaraCon 2021. Welcome everyone to the Cartography panel talking Mystara and Cartography. And our buddy Thorf is here. Thorf, it's what, like 10 o'clock at night where you are?
No, it's 11 actually.
11 at night. Yeah, so
Yeah.
Slightly crazy, but we greatly appreciate this. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, it is way too early for Mr. Bruce, but he got up to join us for breakfast.
It's not way too early. I get up at 6. It's 8 a.m. here. Come on.
I do on weekends.
It's regular business hours.
Yeah. So yeah. Thank you to the audience that are here. Colonel Bruce, Jeff Gander, DJ Hartle are all here. We've got, a dozen or so people watching us already. Folks, in a couple of minutes, feel free to start throwing some questions into the chat there. But one of the first things I wanted to do was, in addition to welcoming Bruce and Thorf here, this is the Cartography panel, and Thorf is known as sort of the guy who does Mystara and Cartography. And look, good or bad, that's you, man. And so the big question for Thorf, like we were asking, Glenn last night, and we've asked some of the other audience members, sort of what was it that got you attracted to Mystara originally, and what is it that keeps you coming back as a piece of this?
Okay. Well, I started off getting into Mystara from D&D from the basic set, the red box basic set that is, which my aunt sent over from America, and I got it from my grandparents. So I guess they weren't worried about the whole, the problems at the time. And then my aunt kept on sending me over the new set as I think sort of as they came out, but I'm not entirely sure of the timing. And that sort of naturally led into finding Gazetteer. And I seem to remember I found the Gazetteers through school friends because, well, I grew up in Orkney in the north of Scotland, where there really is not a lot in the way of shops. So, there was never an experience of walking into the shop and seeing lots of D&D stuff there. I've never had that in my entire life. It would be amazing to see that even now. Yeah, so that got me into the Gazetteers, and when I saw the Gazetteers, I immediately became hooked on the map.
Yeah.
So I always loved atlases and stuff, and I guess I spent a lot of time looking at real world atlases and stuff when I was little. But then the Gazetteers came along, and of course, Bruce had this amazing idea for the Gazetteers where all of the maps could join up together. So I had them all, setting them out, and then, they overlap. I mean, I can't fold them, so what am I supposed to do? So from that, you sort of get the idea, oh, wow, it would be so cool if I could, make my own one. So my original attempts at mapping were on a Commodore Amiga in a program called Deluxe Paint, I think. And unfortunately, I have no idea where those files are. I think if I tried to get my brother to resurrect our old Amiga to find them, he would probably disown me. it would be a bit hard to get it work, I think.
Was that 40 years ago?
Those are gone.
Was that from
That's quite
40 years ago?
Yeah.
I don't know. It must be 91 or 1990, 91.
Yeah, okay.
Anyway, around that time, the other really important thing that happened that really got me hooked completely was, of course, the Princess Ark. So, up until then, I never really got dragons. I mean, this is the one thing that in my town you can actually get, because we had newsagents where you could get a subscription to whatever you like. So, I guess I could have been getting the dragon for quite a while, but, it was always AD&D. I would look to the articles and like, AD&D, no, AD&D, okay, no, okay. Oh, what's D&D? Oh, no, it's D&D and AD&D. So, it's just actually AD&D, but, yeah. And then I found one day, wow, this is a D&D one. It's only D&D. Oh, cool. And then I started reading it, and it was so great. I mean, it was so funny. And the thing that really captivated, I think, us, well, I guess the whole generation of D&D players from your writing, Bruce, was all of the references, the sort of cultural references. I don't know, the zeitgeist of the time. So the first one was kind of Star Trek. It started off from there, but then you had all the other different little things in there, and so many little tiny references that I guess even looking back at it now, it might be hard to find them all. But at the time, they just seemed so timely. So I remember sitting in my parents' car on the way back from the museum, just crying with laughter over some of your. I think it was the one with all the dead bodies. You know the what? Do you remember the episodes where you had, what was it again? There was it was somewhere in the Savage Coast, and these dead bodies kept on turning up, and Calidar kept on finding dead people, or like people kept on trying to kill them and stuff. Oh, yeah. That just had me in stitches at the time. I mean, okay, I was only 14 years old at the time, but yeah. So that had me completely hooked. And then, of course, in each episode you had a new map, and the desire to stick those all together was really also overwhelming. And it took me quite a while to do it, but eventually, once you got things like color scanners and printers, I ended up scanning them all in, printing them all out, and then cutting them out, because of course I couldn't cut out the magazine. And I had them all stuck on my wall at university, which, by the way, makes an interesting shape that sort of goes like this. Yeah. Like, I mean, very, very irregular. Yeah. So that was the good thing about the red seal maps, because they filled in the top and the bottom, so we could have like a proper rectangular shape.
Yeah.
Anyway,
a lot of real maps are like that too, though. They're also pretty irregular. Otherwise, you get large square sections of nothing but blue water out there. So,
that's what happened. That's what happened with the red seal, isn't it? They had the large sections of plains. Yeah, and thank you for chiming in there, Jeff, because actually, I believe Jeff also was one of the people who, he drew them all up by himself and stuck them all together.
Yeah.
I never got quite that far. I wasn't ever really very good at drawing, so I never tried to do it in the manual sort of way. Yeah,
that was one of the things that got me hooked on Mystara early on. Also, we talked about this a bit last night, was everybody of my generation, most of us jumped in with X1 because that's what shipped in the expert box, and it had the original map that got blown up into all of Mystara. Yeah. But then as later modules showed up with ones like X6 and X9 and then 4 and 5, like expanding the map, expanding the footprint as you went, it gave the world a much more coherent sense of a whole that at the time you didn't get from Greyhawk. You did get from Dragonlance, but Forgotten Realms didn't even exist yet. I mean, that was still 5 years in the future. And so to have this unfolding world like that, where you could stitch the maps together and lay them out on your bedroom floor, that was something that I think a lot of folks of our generation, sort of attached themselves to as a part of that. And that was really kind of cool. That was definitely a big plus there. So talk to us a little bit about, so look, Mystara has long been out of print. This has been gone for a while. You can't help yourself. You're sort of addicted to making more maps for us.
Well, I'm kind of running out,
Coming back to Mystara here.
That's an interesting question. Well, I mean, have I ever been away?
Yeah.
But that's not quite fair. I have been away a few times, but yeah, I keep on coming back. Well, in the case of mapping, actually, the funny thing is, mapping was not originally really my thing. So if you look back at 1997, when I was first took part in the Mystara mailing list, there's this great quote you can find of me talking to Mike Harvey from Oregon, and Mike Harvey saying something about talking about making digital maps, and I'm like, I have this line saying, it would be great one day if we could have maps covering the whole world in hex maps. And there's absolutely no clue that it could be me that would do that, because I had no idea. And at that point, there were some really other really great cartographers going along. Like Thibaut Sarla is one of the people who really should be mentioned there. He did such an amazing job from 1997 until about 2007.
Okay.
Yeah, and his maps, I mean, he covered the whole world.
Yeah.
The only person who's mapped as much as he has is Francesco De Ferrari, I think. Hi, Roberto.
Hey there to Puerto Rico.
So, Bruce, I don't mean to like keep covering your face with the comments here.
No,
people are writing some longer things there. You're sort of like the Kilroy graffiti. Like we got
exactly right. My nose sticking over.
So Bruce, obviously, like you had moved off from Mystara at a certain point, had left TSR, and then here's Thorf still dropping some pretty cool Mystara maps. At what point were you aware of the things he was doing, and you know what was your reaction when you first started seeing them, and then your involvement? I know you two have worked together on other things quite a bit over the last few years, but when you were first aware of what he was doing with the Mystara maps and kind of your initial reaction, all of that.
It goes back to about 2013 when I began posting Mystara developments on my blog. And of course, I was working with software that was okay, but had some limitations, especially as regards scaling. And Thorfinn got progressively involved with that and trying to point me in the right direction and fix the scaling problems of my maps. Because, you know, if you do a map that's about 2 or 3 hexes wide, fine, that's, you know, if there's a discrepancy, you're never going to see it. But if you have a map with, say, 50 or 100 hexes across, and each hex is about 24 miles or 100 miles, any discrepancy in the scaling is going to make the problem much, much worse. And that's where I was running into serious issues. Besides the fact that I was still learning how to use the software. So Thorf, very nicely, thank you so much, stepped in and started reproducing these maps and fixing the various problems that I ran into with scaling, and just making them look way better than what I was doing anyway. So from 2013 onward, Thorf was working with me on a regular basis, redoing all these maps and, you know, making them look wonderful. So that's when we really connected. It goes back that far.
The funny thing is, we kind of met each other at various points before that. But I always have a feeling that, like, whenever I was really active in the community, you had just left, or you know, you just dropped in, and I just missed you.
Yeah.
And then, like, we kind of missed each other for a few years. It was quite funny.
Well, yeah. Part of the issue was I was active on certain sites, and I ran into people who were not exactly pleasant. You know, people who just make it a point to get in your face just to get some attention. I got really tired of that, and as soon as I started feeling uncomfortable with the site, I was just zoom out. Yeah. So that might have been one of the cases where it just departed when you arrived.
So the first place that I had interacted with Bruce was back when TSR's official presence was on AOL before Wizards ever bought them.
Oh, good Lord. This is 1990?
Yeah, this was 94, 95, 96, because it was after I had moved to California is when I got more involved in that.
So there was already water in the bilge.
Yes. But that's where I had met Bruce and started interacting with him through that Mystara board there, and James Mishler and some of the others. And I will say, you know, Bruce, your point about sometimes there are some toxic people that just make certain communities unbearable after a while. I don't ever recall any of that in the old AOL days of the Mystara community. Going back, even looking through some of the
actually, there was a little of that, but you probably didn't see it.
There might have been a little, but by and large, that community seemed to hang together fairly well until Wizards sort of stopped their support there. And I think that's when folks shifted to the mailing list, and where people like Thorfinn and some of the early members of Pandius and some of those other guys all came into the community. So Thorf, that's where you and I would have missed each other, is that once things fell off AOL, I felt play for a bit. So but yeah, so let's look. This is a cartography panel, and we've only had the three of us on screen here for a few minutes. So let's let Thorf start showing off some maps here, because that's really what people care about. And so we're gonna let Thorfinn drive the screen here for a bit. Demos, I agree with you. It has been. I've popped in there a bit over the years and talked to folks and said hi. And you're absolutely right there that get your flat suit on for Dragon's Foot. So
no comment.
Yeah.
Boy, that looks really familiar.
Yeah, this one I have on the screen right now is it's a hybrid version of Bruce's climate map of Run, which I expanded out to cover the rest of the world, and then that's been added into the latest chronological snapshot of the world I've been making for. I think we're up to Mystara 1986, so it only actually includes stuff up until around about 1986, except where it has stuff from 1990 as well. Maybe it's all about music. It's kind of a work in progress, but this is the final world model that I'm going to do. Really, the last one.
So a quick hi to Anne, who has popped into the chat here as well.
Hi, Anne.
Hello, Anne.
So
some familiar names that are popping up here.
Yeah. So Earl has asked, did anyone ever make a fully hexed out world map? I think if anyone was crazy enough to do it, it'd be Thorf.
No,
Nope.
not me. There are two actually. One of them is by Thibault, who I mentioned earlier, and I have just posted it on the Atlas website, I guess about a few weeks ago. It's probably too big for me to bring up on my computer right now. It's a classic computer.
Yeah.
That's the problem, you see. They get too big. It gets too big and you just can't open it anymore. Yeah, and the other one is by Francesco De Ferrari, Star.
Okay.
Yeah, both of them are there. But no one has yet done the whole world in 8 miles per hex, which is just...
It's impossible. What's the point?
Yeah.
What's the point, really?
The problem you would run into with that is that where you've got, on the map you've got on screen right now, where it's labeled far end ocean out there, you're going to have 11 map sheets of nothing but blue hexes if you do 8 miles per hex for the entire world. At a certain point, like even in the map of Earth, you could do 8 miles per hex, and you've got the Pacific Ocean out there that you're going to have 38 map sheets of nothing. And at a certain point, that's just boring,
Oh yeah, you can miss those out. There's nothing there anyway. Yeah. No, but even just the square bit in the middle there, you can have all of that and. Oh, hi, JDR. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have the whole of the middle bit, and it's doable. The closest person who's come so far is Jose, who did Ramelin Mystara. He has done, I think, almost all of Run.
Okay.
Yeah.
By the way, we should talk pronunciation.
We were joking about that last night, that somebody needs to publish a definitive pronunciation guide.
I've been looking forward to talking about this.
So Brun. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, if you're
there's only so many ways to mess up Brun, but there's a lot of ways you can mess up Karamikos, Karamikos. Like there's a lot of ways you can go with that one.
So which are you, Bruce?
Pardon me?
For God one, what's your pronunciation?
For wit, what I can't hear you very well.
Tier number 1. What's the official Bruce approved pronunciation
of what?
Karamakos.
Karamakos. It's
Karamakos.
I say Karamakos.
Okay.
Very great. Well, I'm
Gotcha.
stuck in my pronunciations from when I was a kid, so my brother and I always call it Kamiko.
Yeah. EI in general.
How you said this? We are. Go ahead.
EI in general, I pronounce A, unless it's a German word, in which case it becomes I.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
For me, that was a bit of the challenge with some of the pronunciations because I was living in Germany when a lot of the original modules were produced in the mid 80s. From 83 to 88, my father was stationed in Germany, and I was in the German schools for a couple of those years. So I was speaking German 10, 12 hours a day and just English when I was at home and not at school or soccer practice. And so I was sort of subconsciously slapping German pronunciations on a lot of these foreign looking names in all of the D&D modules. And that was true not just of Mystara, but any of the D&D modules that I was picking up at the time. I was slapping, sort of subconscious German pronunciations on things. So that's always been an odd one for me there.
My pronunciation always stretches anywhere from German to straight English with French in the middle. Depending on how what's the style of the word and so forth.
Yeah. And when I was in those German schools for a couple of years, in Europe, a lot of school kids start picking up a second language at like 3rd and 4th grade, and they may even pick up an additional one at 7th or 8th grade. For most of the German kids, English was the second language, right? I got that. Like, I can do English. That's not a problem. Most days. But then when I hit 8th grade and I'd switched schools in Germany, I was still going to German schools, but my choices were French or Latin. And I was an idiot. I chose French because I'm thinking, well, we travel to France pretty regularly. This will be nice. I should have done Latin as much as I like reading history and going back to primary sources and such. But the problem was I had missed the first year of French. So I was learning.
Wow.
So I'm learning French 2 without having had French 1, and I'm learning it in German. So this is not the appropriate way to learn a foreign language.
The same thing happened to me. When I was in France, my entire education was in France. I first picked English as first foreign language in French schools, which of course was very easy for me. Then after that, I picked Spanish, and I had several years of that. But when I went into a hotel management school, the Spanish section was already full, so I ended up being in the German section as a second foreign language, and most of the people in that section already had at least 2 years of German.
Yeah.
So thankfully, English did help a lot learning German. So I ended up with B average.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I managed to pull my way through. Excuse me.
Yeah. So I had several different language templates to slap onto fantasy maps as people were publishing them. I always sort of defaulted to a more German pronunciation, but it's always interesting to eventually meet the creators, folks like Bruce or some of the guys who worked on Harn. I've met a few of them over the years, or some of the other products out there, and find out from them the way they think things are supposed to be pronounced.
Yeah, it helps immensely when you have 2 or 3 foreign languages that you've been dabbling with.
Yeah.
Isn't English just bad German with French mixed in? Yeah. And other things. You never forget that English also includes a lot of Scandinavian, Norse, basically, or Dane.
Yeah, I'm unlikely to forget that.
So there's a lot more than just those 2 languages, actually.
Yeah. A quick digression, and then we're going to let Thorf start showing off some other maps here.
Yeah, please.
A good friend of mine when I was in the military actually grew up with Dutch as a first language, living in South America because his father was in the oil business, and so he had worked in a lot of Spanish speaking countries and Portuguese speaking countries, but his first language was Dutch. Again, I had learned French in the German schools. And one of the things that Eric and I were talking one day, and the conclusion that we've come to is that Dutch, the Dutch language is essentially German as spelled by drunk French people. Like if you imagine how a drunk French guy would pronounce a German word, that's the Dutch word for it.
Yeah, and pronounced with people who have something stuck in their throat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, totally. All right, Thorf, what else we got for some maps that we can wow the audience with here and take everybody back to their teenage years or impress the hell out of them with your artistic skills?
Give me a second.
Switching screens.
Well, I have my computer's not exactly keeping up very well, I'm afraid, but I have something new to show today.
We got something new to show.
So I've been working. Right. Yeah. Oh wow, I've been working on this one for quite a while. If you can load. Yeah, one of the biggest problems in Mystara's cartography was caused by I always call it the Norwold conundrum, because the connection with Norwold to the rest of the known world was actually not like this, but like this. So it was slightly misaligned, or I think deliberately misaligned when they created TM1.
Who knows?
Probably the cartographers at the time decided, like, we need to fit into this space, so let's just move slightly this way.
Let's tilt it a bit, yeah.
Yeah, but because of that, it caused some problems in that area, which is to say Heldan. And as a result, the Heldan area kind of became a bit fuzzy. And then compiling this, we had when they came up with the map for Windar and venerable for X11, it had completely different stuff for that area of Norwold, which is obviously just completely wrong. So basically speaking, it required, completely being redone. So I've finally completed doing that.
Yeah, back then when we were designing maps, we had a lot of blind spots when it came to expanding into other areas, because initially the world wasn't designed to do that. So there was much retrofitting, and that caused a lot of problems. Especially when I threw in like the poles and connecting with the Hollow World and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And Bruce, probably like a lot of people just creating an initial smaller area map and slowly expanding it, there probably wasn't a lot of thought given to the fact that this is probably on a sphere and you've got to stitch pieces together as you move.
Yeah.
As things start to pinch and,
Back then, there were no computers to do that kind of stuff. So, it was mostly artistic more than technically correct.
Yeah.
Globe projections. Yeah, no, we didn't have that.
Yeah.
Let's see how well we can blow this up and center on this here.
That looks good.
Thankfully, with Mystara, the projections for the globe are basically they're the same throughout. They're consistent throughout. So there was only ever one different projection that was used on the world, not just the world map, but any of the maps, which is actually really good because it makes things a lot more simple. And it means that all of the maps that are existing are actually already have a proper projection, just as workable it is. So basically what you're seeing here is, Heldan. Can I zoom in? I'm not sure if I can.
There you go. Now your cursor's on the screen there.
Yeah, but it's not letting me zoom in. I think my computer's not keeping up very well. Well, it'll do like that. So basically what I've done is I put together Denegos and Norwold, and then, I guess it's Heldan itself all together. And the thing is, about this area, it underwent all sorts of different waves of fan expansion. So I think the first person was Jeff Gander, and he created a very nice river system in the south, but just the one. And then Thibault remade that, and then after that, Jonathan Roll remade that again, and he added more rivers and more stuff. And at the same time, Thibault had made another version, adding even more rivers. So, it all just sort of blossomed and blossomed. And the way that we work in the fan community is it's quite funny because everyone builds on to what the other people have done before. So it all builds up in these layers and layers and layers and layers, and it becomes really hard to see like who did what. If you try and trace back an individual, for example, an individual river or town or lake or whatever, or even hex, although I don't go that far usually, you can find that it originated back in Jeff Gander's map from 1998, or else perhaps from JTR's map from 2005, or it's all pretty complicated. I try to keep all of the little bits, even if I move them around a bit, and then add more to make it look like more like one of the Gazetteer maps. And basically, this is what it all comes out at.
So we're going to blame it all on Jeff.
Well, this one you can blame all on me. I can take responsibility for everything.
Let me ask Thorf on a technical side. What's the software you're using to stitch this together? Are you working in Photoshop, or do you have some sort of other map application you're working with?
I use Illustrator.
Illustrator, okay.
Yeah, and I actually have a highly expensive plugin called Map Publisher for that, which is what lets me use the predictions and stuff, which is really, really nice. I wish it was a bit cheaper, but yeah. And
yeah.
I stitch it together in Photoshop.
I've done a bunch of maps over the years, some good, some bad. I primarily work within Photoshop for the stuff I do because it's the one I'm more comfortable with. But for something, especially with the hex grid like you've got here, I absolutely see Illustrator as being more useful for that. Back when I was teaching graphic design in college, I kept wanting to incorporate a map assignment just to make the students have to do something really different. And the whatever chair of whatever department I happened to be working in at the time always got mad at me for trying to slip a map assignment in there. This isn't the geography department. This is graphic design. Go talk. And they kind of missed the point of having the students pick up some additional skills to work on there. But I've always been really impressed with them and thought if that was a Photoshop map that you either had a nuclear powered supercomputer or you were working on little snippets at a time to stitch together because of the detail you had.
Yeah.
So well, there's that. So actually, the part of held down in the middle there is a separate file. So each of the countries is a separate file for the known world, just to make things doable. I wonder if I can pick up the separate file. If my computer dies, then...
Yeah. All right. So Jeff is saying he's using the hex mapper for years. So speaking of software that was never supported, look, I started drawing maps back in the 80s using the old original Mac Paint for the Macs back in 84, 85. And then upgraded to Super Paint, which unfortunately got canned when what was then Aldus, now Adobe, but when Aldus bought, when Macromedia was bought out, is when Super Paint kind of died. So, okay, so there we're looking at some individual maps.
Here's why I like Illustrator.
Well,
so
wait, if you go a little bit to the left, we can see the gal washing the laundry right on the shores of the river. Yeah, I mean, keep zooming in. Could be interesting.
It's taking me a while to render, but this is why I like vectors, because you can zoom in as far as you like, and if I zoom in too far, you'll be able to see all the little errors that are probably there in my very primitive line art.
With software like that, it's very easy to become absolutely what's the term, a perfectionist, and going in there and wasting a lot of time on really, 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 really tiny detail that satisfy you, and nobody is ever going to see that.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, very true.
But the flip side of it is there are certain places in things like this where some folks who know their way around some graphic design are really going to appreciate the differences. For instance, the slight halo that Thorfinn puts around the text. You just zoomed out a little too far. But around the labels, like the province labels and such, there's a slight space around there. Altenwald, that's a great example. Leave it right there. Where there's just that little bit of spacing around the letters that allows the letters to stand in front of the rest of the map, and gives them a little bit of room to breathe around the terrain that's underneath them. Those are the kinds of little details that really make the maps that people took time and care with stand out from just the other stuff that's thrown out there.
It was a process for fan maps, for the fan-made maps. That was a process, and the original one back in the late 90s, early 2000s, well, the software to do that didn't really exist. So, for example, Adam Anter, the guy who did some really nice looking sort of pixel art maps back in around, I think it was 2000, he did all of his halos manually.
Yeah.
As in,
which is crazy.
Drew in each pixel around the letter.
Yeah.
Which is amazing. But at the same time, it was like for Thibault, that this was not an option, because he had so many maps. I mean, he had hundreds of maps. He couldn't do that with all his labels.
That's a lot of time. Lance, you were talking about tutorial for some fantasy cartography there. There's actually, for a while, the Cartographers Guild channel on YouTube had a series of, it was about 30 or so when I moved on and was watching other stuff on creating fantasy maps and a lot of the details and nice touches and important things that you can do with stuff. And that's one of those things, you zoom in enough and the darker blue edges to the rivers become more apparent. But when you zoom out to this level or a little further out, you don't pick them out as a detail. But if you turn those off, you would notice the difference in the two maps, that the rivers don't stand out quite as stark from being zoomed out. And it's only when you zoom really far in that you see where those details come from. And I know we're probably losing some of the audience's attention here, getting into this sort of graphic stuff.
Well, it is about cartography, and this is 100% cartography related.
Yeah, but this is the stuff that makes the good maps stand out as good maps, and that's one of the things that I think is worth calling attention to, is the attention to detail here. In the things that the eye doesn't immediately pick up, but are still there and recognizable when they're missing, that make for good quality maps. And I think that's important to call out, that those details are present, and that's part of what makes these as good as they are. So
great.
Now let's see if I can get on a different map.
I hope it sounds fascinating, Earl. I hope we're not boring you. So, howdy, Sean. Welcome, Sean. Sean's got.
Hi, Sean.
Hey, Sean.
We're going to be talking to Sean tomorrow around noon Eastern, talking about the vaults. So
yeah,
nice to see you,
I'll be
Sean.
asleep at that time, so have a good time.
So, all right, Thorf, what else you got to show off here?
What would you like to see?
Okay, audience, this is your guys' show. Y'all help drive the train here. Let me ask an oddball question, Thorf. I don't know if you've ever specifically tackled this, but I honestly never went looking. Towards the end of the BECME line of products, before Mystara was converted to second edition, there was the old cave mouth modules that took place in the Thunder Rift sort of sub-world that was theoretically Mystara compatible, but I don't know was ever officially located somewhere in Mystara. Did you park it somewhere in your maps, and if so, where?
No, I left that up to people like Harvard, who has done a pretty good job, I think, on... thank you very much, Jeff. Yeah, Harvard did a pretty good job of sticking it in, I think. What I know about that is that there was a suggested connection point, I think, or maybe multiple suggested connection points. I'm not really sure, but I left all the mapping of that up to other people.
Yeah, I mean it's easy enough to just sort of drop it in a mountain range somewhere, but I didn't know if you had definitively located it on any of your maps.
No, I would rule that it's demi-plane or like an alternate something, just to stop me from having to play. Yeah,
So
I have to keep things like, I can't do absolutely everything. So for the same reason, I haven't done any maps of Blackmoor.
yeah,
It would be nice to do maps of Blackmoor eventually, but there's some other people who've done really nice maps of them, so I'm quite happy to enjoy other people's maps there.
yeah. So let me ask, because it's something that I'm interested in. What do you have handy that you could pull up for either of the islands, either Minrathad or Arendi, that you could pull up easily enough for some of the island areas that are just off the south coast here?
Let me just go and find that. I can find it really quickly, but my computer is really not enjoying this.
Yeah,
it's getting old. Actually,
my previous computer was like that. My current one was a Christmas present last year, thankfully, because my 10-year-old one was starting to choke on certain things.
Yeah, well, I use this computer exclusively this is my only computer when I was working on Bruce's first Calidar group. So it's kind of amazing to think now, but all the maps for that first group were made in this laptop.
Wow.
Which is, I couldn't do that today. I don't know how I managed to do it.
About wanting to maybe see some undersea or underground maps, if you've got any of those handy.
Good idea.
So feel free to focus more on what the audience is asking for than anything that I was wanting to see. But it's amazing now to pull out some of the older computers that some of us may still have laying around the house, and some of the computers we used to work on when we were doing things like this, and wonder how the hell we ever got by with as slow as they are. So,
you have to realize back when I was at TSR, we hardly ever used computers to make those Mystara maps.
Mm-hmm.
It's really the last 3 years that we started doing some digital maps on Mac, but the memory wasn't there, so these were fairly small maps. Everything was done on light tables, lick and stick, and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And 15
I'd love to
layers
hear more
of
about
acetate. What?
I'd love to hear more about that, because it's a completely unknown world, and at the same time, I can kind of imagine how the layers fit together and stuff.
Well, when I worked on the maps for the Princess Ark Adventures, I didn't have a light table at home since I did most of that work at home. So instead, I waited for a nice sunny day, and I would tape my maps on the windows with the sun in the background and use layers of transparent paper in order to draw the details and things like that. And then I recopied everything with felt pens and stuff like that. Turned that over to the map department. Well, actually, Dragon Magazine at the time, but they handed it back to the map department. They were all buddies of mine, so I sat with them and we worked around on the details of these maps. That was the process. But yeah, that was my light table. A sunny day with a big window.
Bruce is saying that at TSR it was light tables and not computers. It's not like TSR was some outlier that was behind the times from a technological standpoint. Any of the companies were doing the same thing. GDW was doing the same thing for both their role-playing and their wargaming maps. SPI was doing that for their wargaming maps until TSR bought them out. That's how Chaosium was doing their stuff. I mean, like, everybody was using light tables and manual paste up for all of these things. That's just the state of the technology at the time. And it wasn't until PageMaker was released in 85, 86, somewhere around there, that you could actually start doing some of the text layout on the computers. But even that took a while to catch up. And it wasn't until the early 90s that you actually started seeing things that were much more consistently produced on the computers like that from anybody. I mean,
imagine trying to do like a trail map on a light table. TSR shelled out a bunch of dough to purchase at least one light table big enough to do things like trail maps.
Yeah.
They're
Wow.
huge. Yeah. Can you imagine?
Yeah,
It must be
you almost
massive.
need to like hover somebody over the middle of the light table to work on the middle of the map. Sort of.
Literally, yeah. You have to crawl over the table and make sure you don't take anything off. That's when you use lick and stick, you have to be careful where you put your hands down, because when you remove it, you end up with some of the material, either tags or cities, and stuck to your hand. So you have to be real careful with that.
Yep.
There you go.
All right.
Sorry,
So here we got men with
loading up the Heldan Illustrator file really hacked my computer. It took this long to manage to get this up. Yeah. Sorry, someone a moment ago was asking about maps of islands. Well, I mapped out all of course, Irendi and Minrathad, but there's a lot more to go. John Calvin did some great maps of Ocalia. And otherwise, there's been some, I guess, the Pearl Islands were all mapped out by Thibault many years ago. But Mystara has a lot of interesting little islands to cover. I kind of feel that these would work better at, for example, Robin does the 1 mile per hex map, which would just be death for me because I can't cover the whole world in 1 mile per hex. But for little islands like this, I mean, I can see it could work quite well.
Yeah.
So
you should just pick one island and just develop it at a different scale.
Yeah. It would be quite nice to do that.
Thorf, let me ask: as you're locating like some of the shipwrecks and the undersea features on here, what's your source for some of that information? Is it somewhere canonically in the original Mystara stuff, or is that things that have been added by the community after the ceasing of publication and support by Wizards?
That's a very good question. Well, the answer is, with all of the known world maps, all of the stuff you see on them is from the official stuff. So I added almost nothing from fan things, although, to be honest, there really isn't all that much fan stuff to be added at this scale. If you zoom in a bit, there's tons of stuff, but if you just at the 8 mile per hex scale, there was enough already in most cases. Yeah, so if you want to zoom in, you can add whatever you like, but at this scale, that's what there is. And most of the stuff there comes from the undersea map from PC3.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Which I may be able to pop up in the next, but let's wait and see.
Well, that was a fun project.
Without killing your computer, we did have a request for some of the undersea or underground maps. So without killing the computer, if you can pull up one or two of those might be fun to see.
That's the map from PC3.
Right.
This is actually a slightly adjusted map, so it's in the editing processes, which is why it's got some rough edges. There we go. Now you can't see them. Just hide it a bit.
The outlines, the blue outlines between the different depths, is that you or is that from the original?
You mean which ones? The light ones?
When you look, for example, the very pale blue around the shores, and the next lower layer, you have it looks like a dark blue outline separating the two colors. Was that original? That's got to be you, because I don't think we could do this back then.
Really?
Yeah.
It could be. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah.
I would have to look at
Well, it looks like a black outline.
Yeah, there's definitely some sort of line there.
Yeah, it helps separate the various blues representing the depths. But I'll check later. But I don't think we had the ability to do outlines like that between different colors, especially with stick.
It wasn't until about until the third Poor Wizard's Almanac map that there was even a stroke around the coast. That was a very late development, wasn't it?
You know, your audio is really scratchy. I'm having a devil of a time understanding what you're saying. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm saying
you are kind of
around the coast. Around the coast, there wasn't really any kind of stroke around the coast until very late on, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Boy.
Shall we go to an underground one?
Yeah, let's see what you've got.
Fingers crossed it'll just pop up.
Where cartography and archaeology meet.
Well, my favorite underground one is actually Bruce's newest underground one from Alsatia, which is an amazing map. It must have taken just hours and hours and hours to get this drawing.
Yes.
I mean,
Way
I
too
can
much
completely
time.
imagine. I can completely imagine because it took me, wow, a great deal of time to represent. It should be coming.
Yeah, I just had fun throwing in the dwarven rail system.
That was fun.
You know, dwarves taking the subway to go to the dungeon, you know, hey, no problem.
Commuting to work there.
Yeah, exactly.
The black outlines. Okay, so Mark pulled up his PC3 map and took a look and says the black outlines are on the original.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
That was
okay.
1991, I think.
Yeah. Wow.
Okay, so here's some of our underground. So, I mean, at a certain point, digging through the underground, you're going to come out the other side into the hollow world, right?
You could. It'd be difficult, though. If there's lava in between.
That's where I get kind of I kind of laugh at things. You know, some people go on about having Ilarium next to the northern reaches, right? This is the pet peeve of so many people about Mystara. Do they not realize that dungeons are not real?
Yeah, I know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, these caverns underneath the earth, they're not real.
Yeah.
You don't have caves like that where you can just run in and out all the time. That's not how caves work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of my favorite laughable comments in pretty much any discussion of any fantasy anything is when someone says, "That's not realistic." What part of this is?
Yeah.
Well,
the illusion. I think they're referring more to the illusion of realism than to actual realism, because you know, if it feels real, even though it is absolutely ludicrous, then you're fine. You're on home base there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think
it's all about suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
Well,
some folks use the word realism when what they really mean is sort of internal consistency.
Yeah.
That is a much better way to phrase it. But when people are talking about fantasy gaming and talk about realism,
right.
Wait a minute.
It's what they mean is, does it feel right?
Yes.
Does it feel right, or does it feel really chintzy, whatever?
That's a nice comment.
Yes.
But if it's real
better
for
to
you,
do in our life than pretending.
That's totally cool.
Escapism from reality.
Yeah. Well, my point of view on this is that there are some great things to be gained from using the real world tools to help make the world. So
exactly.
That's where realism comes in.
Yeah.
So we use it when we want to, and then we throw it out when we don't.
And that's why they need to use D&D to convince schools to teach kids geography and history. Because then they can design some really cool stuff that's completely unreal, but fun.
Thorfinn, before we get off of this map, can you zoom in over on the lower left corner, the area below where it says Dimholm? I'm just sort of curious to see some of the detail you've got in that terrain there. I know it's not the lower left of the whole map, but it was the lower left of what we had on screen here. Now, to kind of zoom in, now it's more towards your upper left there. I just wanted to sort of show off some of that detail a little bit. Yeah, in that area. I mean, that's some whole different terrain, different map symbols from what you'd had up on the surface, and some very different contours and symbology and such. And look, that's some really fascinating detail to see. Never mind the fact that we've got a fantasy railroad floating around down here now, right? We've got the subway, but the all of that level of detail in the new map symbology and everything, and the cross hatching that you've got around the edges there. I mean, that's just some really cool, fascinating, fun to see kind of map making that's coming out there.
It's professional work.
Yeah.
Well, the cross-hatching there is actually a traced cross-hatching from the Shadow Elf Gazetteer's map.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is to say, I painstakingly reconstructed the exact same cross-hatching that they had on the map.
Oh, wow.
I had a lot of time back then. That was 2006.
I'm surprised you didn't go for some stock art of cross hatching and just use that. And that's what I do. I mean, I don't have the patience. I mean, I do have patience to make the maps, but when it comes down to that kind of detail, is like, no way, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was 2006, so I had time.
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are some.
What
was that?
There's three holes in my mapping. The holes in my mapping are 2010, 2012, and 2017. Those correspond to babies. You see, that's how my kids were born.
Well, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Some of the cross hatching and some of those other effects, those are some things that I had figured out how to create something that looked decent using some of the filters in Photoshop, between adding noise and the crosshatch filter and some of the other filters within Photoshop itself. But those are a little more pencil sketch and a little less sort of ink sketch from what you have here. Yours are a little more sort of direct and stark, whereas the ones that I've worked on in the past have been a little fuzzier. But again, it's just a different style of map, and what I was doing in Photoshop would not look right in this kind of map. It's just a completely different style. So
I'm laughing at
these are illustrator.
Go ahead.
They're all illustrator lines. They're all illustrator lines, so they are very stark. They're literally just straight lines.
Yeah. So
I could have hand drawn them to make them look better, but I'm not going to go back and do it now.
Anne's got a good point here that sometimes history does surprise us. Absolutely. That's one of the great things about reading history books and sort of learning some stuff from there. Sean had a point up here about where you started learning some history and geography, and in helping learn some of the reading and math. When I was in grad school, one of the research projects I did was actually on informal learning, and where do people pick up some of the information that they have, and how well or not does it affect their broader academic knowledge. And one of the things that we found is that while their in-class grades may not have been the best, the broad base of knowledge that gamers bring to the table was actually pretty wide, because of a lot of the additional reading they did in support of the things they wanted to be able to use in games. And so in Mystara, if you wanted to learn some of the historical background that inspired some of the different nations and places on the map, there were plenty of historical places to go read those things. And
very, very true.
Look, Mystara wasn't the only place like that. There were plenty of others like that as well. But that was that informal learning, that broader base of knowledge, excuse me, that gamers brought to the table much more widely than the general population.
Right. And in the opposite direction, knowing about history makes it a lot easier. If you know what was out there before, then it's easy as a designer to mix and match different cultures, different histories to come up with something that feels new, but really isn't. It's just a composite of two different things that already existed in the real world.
Yep.
It does help.
Yeah. And it's always fun when you do something like that and then you get people saying, oh man, that would never really happen. Well, it kind of
Mm-hmm.
It sort of did. So there was somewhere up here, there was an interesting...
Jeff asked a good question we should address. Jeff talked about rock homes underground.
Yes.
Which is one of the big unmapped bits of the known world. And I think there have been bits and pieces, but as far as I know, no one has done a complete map of it.
Yeah. DJ, that's absolutely the point. I think that was kind of the point of the Hollow World almost.
Yeah.
Here's an opportunity to go do something in ancient Greece without it having to be ancient Greece. So
absolutely.
So now I was scrolling back up through the comments because from a little while ago there was an interesting comment that Jeff had thrown up, and where did it go? Give me just a second. Here we go. This might be entertaining to try to do. An ethnographic map of the known world, where all the people came from and how they got there, and man, that's likely to cause some headaches and some head scratching and probably some people complaining about things. Look, let's face it, they're gamers. They're going to complain about stuff anyway. But
Thorfinn, that sounds really familiar, doesn't it? Ethnographic maps. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I know setting with those.
Oh my lord!
All right. So what are you showing us here, Thorf? This is the primary continent.
Yeah, I double clicked on this one a while ago. It took a while to load. This is the map I posted last December, which is basically the updated trail map.
Wow.
Yeah, it's all of the maps pasted together. I wanted to make this map, of course, since I started mapping in 2005. But at the time, it was basically impossible to do it because of technology. Because previously to that, people had done it, but only with, like, his hexes were far smaller than mine. So my hexes were far bigger, pixel-wise. So I couldn't do it back then at all.
Yeah, truly epic indeed.
But it's slowing your computer down enough that you're starting to pixel it a little bit in the video.
The video.
Yeah, but it's rendering. It's coming through.
Yeah.
I will tell you. So when you first shared this one online, I shared it with some friends of mine, and one of them complained that it crashed his computer when he tried to open it. I put a copy of this on an external drive so I could move it to my son's computer because my son had an HDMI out so that I could pull it up on the TV in our living room. Just because I wanted to see it that big.
Mm-hmm. Well, some people have been printing it out on shower curtains this year. Did you see that?
Yeah.
People have been printing it on shower curtains. I think it's at Walmart or something like that. And
wow.
Because the shower curtains are really big, it just fits very nicely. So
that's crazy. Yeah. That's no, it definitely is an epic map there. That I still have both of my trail maps. I still have my east and west trail maps, and I actually have a second copy of the western trail map still in the shrink wrap. I have no idea how it survived.
I saw that this morning.
But I do have one. And I'm not opening it if I can help it. I have always wanted a place somewhere that I could put the two trail maps up on the wall together, adjoining. My wife has flatly refused and said if we ever had a place big enough to do that, we're just going to buy a projector for the TV and we're going to have a widescreen projecting on the wall, and I don't get to put my maps up.
Well, I did that at university. When I was at university, I was sharing a room with my brother, and we had a massive wall, so I just couldn't resist it. I did it.
Yeah.
It was up
If I
for
could get
quite
my
a while.
garage cleared out, I could probably lay it all out on my garage floor and then at least get a couple of pictures to prove that I had done it once.
Yeah.
But no, these are fantastic. Thorf, let me ask: as you've mapped some of the rest of the continent beyond the original maps, when you started to stitch in X6, X9, X4, and 5, you mentioned Norwald and then having to fit X11 in there. How much of the detail have you had to go digging around for it? How much of it were you able to bring in straight from the modules or from some of the canonical material? How much of this is you and the community, and how much of this is what was originally published and just had to go digging around?
Well, in the case of the known world, it's basically I had already basically completed them quite a lot, quite early on. So around about 2006, I think, or 2008 maybe, they were completely done. So after that, it was just sort of, adding a few little icons here and there, for which people like Simone Neri and Michel Cartography were very helpful about suggesting things to add. And there are still things I should probably be adding to these maps.
Yeah.
But for the other areas, it's a little bit more, well, they're really quite threadbare, the older maps. So it's more a map of trying to find extra things to add in rather than, like leaving things out. So when I've gone through those maps, as I said, I'm currently up to 1986, so still way back in the mid-80s. But going through all the modules with a fine-tooth comb, basically. Not too fine-tooth a comb, because I don't have the time to do that. But trying to go through it with pick up little details and add them as much as I can. And that's been going pretty well. There's a few problem areas. The main problem area is still to come, which is that I'm not sure I told you Bruce actually yet, Bruce, but I'm afraid someone made a mistake when putting the Savage Coast onto the rest of the map, so that it doesn't really fit properly. And there's a solution, but the solution involves adding some territory.
Yeah, well, whatever.
So
it's unavoidable. I remember having a lot of problems trying to figure out how the various pieces connected. That was hard to begin with, and I'm not at all surprised that there are discrepancies today that still needed adjusting.
Bruce,
well,
let me
you
ask.
did such a great job.
Pardon me?
You did such a great job with all the. I mean, each of the maps had a little map showing where it was.
Yeah.
I didn't touch those for years because I was terrified of them.
Yeah, window technology for you.
Yeah.
Bruce, let me ask. So Thorf had mentioned some of the content in some of the modules was a bit threadbare, was the term he used. How much of that was you could only fit so much in the modules? How much of that was by design to allow the players the opportunity to explore and fill it in themselves in whatever fashion they wanted? How much of that was we just ran out of time to get the thing published and out the door? What's kind of the breakdown of sort of how that happened?
It really depended. Most of the maps, first off, most of the material designed for Mystara after after Frank Mincer left, basically, all of that was farmed out to freelancers.
Okay.
Most of the maps that I was getting from freelancers were fairly bare. There wasn't a whole lot of detail on them because, well, freelancers are really squeezed with time. They don't have the kind of time that I had available. Spending weeks on end on detailing maps. Well, freelancers aren't going to do that. So very often what happened, if I had the time, I would go back with the staff designers at GSR and add detail. Sometimes it worked well. Sometimes it created more problems than anything else. But some of the maps, I don't think it was by design. I think it was mostly a question of time. It was mostly a question of how knowledgeable and comfortable the author was with the subject to be able to go in there and just add a bunch of stuff. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah. It just, in some cases, it would have made sense. Hey, we're leaving some blank slate out here for you guys to fill in for yourself, like by design. In some cases,
no such planning. I can guarantee you.
Well, and in some cases, I could see, the very valid explanation of the freelancers only have so much time, so I'm going to color in the important parts that are needed for this adventure, and the hell with the rest of it. I can totally see that. So,
I mean, I'm looking at maps, the early maps that were done for Forgotten Realms, and I was dismayed at how bare they were. They didn't have much detail at all. It's just a question of style and preference. Being born and raised in Europe, a map is not a map unless it has a ton of stuff on it, a lot of little villages and places and little roads connecting everything. That's the way I see maps. That's a European point of view. In America, you're born in a place that has a lot of space. I mean, a lot of space, and very often with absolutely nothing. I mean, I took a drive across South Dakota, and let me tell you, a lot of nothing there.
Yeah. I've done a half a dozen cross-country drives in my life, and there are definitely parts of this country that you're right, there is nothing.
Right. So if you're born and raised in a place like that, it makes sense to draw a map that reflects your experience.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. We were talking the other day in a wargaming discussion about different maps and how some maps look really good and some maps aren't all that attractive. And somebody joked about all the maps for the games that are set in North Africa in World War II look pretty boring. It's a desert. Like, what the hell are you going to do?
Well, what else are you going to find there? Yeah.
It's khaki. Like, that's what it is. There's nothing. You can artificially create something, but you're faking it at that point. There's nothing out there. So
yeah. And then you look at tactical maps for say Netherlands, where everything is packed in together.
Yep.
It's very detailed.
Yeah, absolutely. So, there we go. There's the big module coverage map. Yeah,
this is 1986's map, and I've actually done some work on this fairly recently to make it all into one contiguous thing, so it all fits together. So, for example, I mentioned Norwell was off. Well, it was off rotation. So this is a version with fixed. The rotation has been fixed, so it's slightly different from the original map, but it kind of fits it okay. I wonder if it went. Perhaps not. The thing is, the older maps and the older modules. I mean, we're talking about early to mid 80s modules, and the modules are very much designed for adventures and not for the setting information. So we tend to look at them nowadays, kind of looking for the setting information a lot. I mean, we shouldn't expect it to be there, right? Because there was no need for it to be there.
Yeah.
So from the modern fan's perspective, it kind of feels threadbare, but that's not I'm not criticizing the adventure. It's just the actual setting part. So, for example, for the Savage Coast, I mean, it's an area of thousands of miles long and there's nothing there.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make sense from a world perspective. It might make sense from an adventure perspective, but even then, if you just do a little bit of creative imagination, you can easily imagine, well, the adventurers are sailing past, assuming there was nothing there, but that doesn't actually mean that there was nothing there, does it?
Right. I mean, the consistency between how densely packed the known world is versus what lies west is pretty startling. You realize normally, because of the way human beings or just beings work, they spread out and they build places, they build towns and stuff like that. So if you're going to have an area like the known world with a ton of cities and stuff like that, that all along the coast, it's all going to be settled for sure, especially in land that is kind of nice, like the the Hispanic area, and Belaine, etc. That lower Savage Coast area. All of that I did actually populate it quite a lot with the Lupins and the Rakasta, but the problem is when you design a world and you start from a small area and you expand, you're going to have consistency issues, as opposed to starting from the outside and you zoom in. Now you have a little bit of perspective about, well, where is it on the continent? What is the climate there? What are those places going to look like based on the layout of the continent, where the seas are, where the rivers are, what the weather patterns are, etc. So it gets a little bit involved at that level, but that doesn't detract from the actual game itself, where you zoom in on a dungeon and forget about the rest of the world. It doesn't matter anymore.
Well, you know, Bruce, I thought kind of tracks a little bit with sort of the development of. Sorry, Thorf. I was just going to say, you know, Bruce's comparison of Europe versus the U.S. and the way things were mapped, with Europe being very densely packed and very well developed and lots of things to put on the map. You get over to the U.S., especially if you look at some of those colonial era maps, a lot of them are fairly blank, but we know they weren't empty.
That's right.
People making the maps treated them as empty because they didn't have the same things they were looking for back in Europe. There was no 400-year-old walled town with guard towers and whatever like that didn't exist along the Mississippi River. But the city of Cahokia was not small, and it was just a different kind of city. But it was one that the cartographers of the time kind of considered beneath them a little bit, and it's unfortunate that sort of cultural bias existed in the 16 and 1700s. Otherwise, we'd have some really cool maps of North America and Central America made by the people exploring them, if they had taken the time to treat them as worthy of that level of attention. So the fact that sort of zipping over a huge chunk of the Savage Coast and looking down there going, it doesn't really look all that cool. Like, I could totally buy that from sort of historical precedent that we already have in our world.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
yeah.
So I could absolutely see that.
I mean, can you imagine you going up the Mississippi River and you're mapping that in great detail, and assuming that everything that's out of sight, is basically empty.
Yeah.
Because your boat doesn't go there. You can't go across the prairie to find out what else lies east or west. So we know it's populated on the shores of Mississippi, but the rest, that must be all wilderness, of course.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Paul's got an interesting question here. Just curious, what's the biggest one you've got? And some of this limitation was probably your computer not killing itself.
Right.
I'm not sure. Actually, the largest map I've made so far is probably not Mystara. The largest map I've made so far was for Bruce's Calidar, which was the original map for the setting.
We should be shooting for the moon.
Oh wow! It was the utmost limit of how I could make it. It was 40,000 by 40,000 pixels. I still can't believe I made it on this computer. I mean, open the file, I would open the file and I'd go away and have do things for about an hour. By the way, if it crashed.
Part of this is my.
I would cry.
Part of this is my fault because I designed some huge continents with no sea, so you couldn't actually cut them apart and design them separately, which would have simplified things greatly. Wow. Mea culpa.
Yeah, in retrospect, yeah. Yeah, wow, that file is just wow. So, of course, I shrunk it down to actually use it. So, the actual file was not 40,000 by 40,000. But, I think, what was it? The file I have on the screen right now here is more than 22 by 22,000 pixels.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling.
The one right here.
Yeah, it reminds me of some of the it reminds me of some of the early days of doing audio editing where you had, you would multi-track a song, and then when you would be ready to render the final product, you'd hit render and then go to dinner.
Yeah.
And you'd come back and hope that what you got out the other end was what it was supposed to be, because if you had mixed one track a little too low and you needed to reshuffle the levels for the different tracks and render again, now you just lost an hour and a half of your day.
Yeah.
And so
well, I had crashes on that file. I had crashes, and when it crashed, I mean, you could just cry because it crashes, and not only do you lose the work, but you have to open the file again. Oh.
Yeah, you spend a night or a couple of days for while the computer is crunching, and then it crashes. You thanks.
Yeah.
It's useful to have multiple computers for that. You can go and do something else.
Yeah, I have. I actually had a war game map I was working on one time that crashed in the middle of loading. It didn't just crash; it wrecked the hard drive. I had to get a hard drive recovery piece of software to recover the hard drive to an external drive to get everything else back besides just that map, which is insane. Paul, math checks out. Yes, you are correct. And 75 dpi is a little low for printing resolution, but yeah, that's still. I mean, at that point, you're not doing bed sheets; you're doing football fields, right? You're doing house parks. So yeah, that. DJ, I feel this. I feel this deeply within my bones.
Yeah, I can understand that, DJ. When I originally made the map for Mystaran, I was working up quite late at night one night, and I finished. I was literally reaching for save, and the application disappeared from my desktop.
Just there.
And I hadn't saved it yet.
Yeah, save often. That is the.
Oh yeah, we've all had that. You spend an hour on fixing a little thing, and you got it just right, and it crashes.
And I suspect there's a line that you will have to join to be a part of that. I don't think you're the only person in that group.
Thank you very much.
Let me ask.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to change subject here slightly a little bit. Just we've spent a lot of time talking about the updates and research and corrections and things that you've done to the existing maps as they were developed throughout the Mystara canon that was published. Have you ever taken a part of the world and just colored in the blank lines yourself and just said, forget it, nobody's published anything about this, let me go fill it in with what I want to put there?
Remarkably little. almost nothing. The only one I can really think of the top of my head is the Arm of the Immortal. The area you can see just above your head there, Brant. Yeah. No one has done that bit here. Around about here. Yeah. So I made a map of that. But the funny thing about these maps is, I make the map, and then it's not really finished. It's not perfect. I put it online, and then a few years later I come back to it and think, oh no, that shouldn't be there. I should move it. But then unfortunately, I go and look at someone else's map and I go, wait, no. They've based their map on my map. So now I can't change their map.
Yeah. Well, this is Kothar area too, on the far eastern side of the land areas, I guess, east of Alphatia. There's literally nothing there. So you had to throw in some details just because I needed it. It fit in the in the frame of what I was working. And so, well, okay, I got to do something with Kothar, so just slap some things in there.
Kothar is the one place that's defeated Thibault. You map everywhere other than that.
Yeah. So, Thorv, I'm not sure what else you've got handy or already open for show and tell that we wouldn't just sit here and wait for things render. But if you've got a second, if there's not something else already open, I am curious if you've got some of the non-Mystara maps that you would want to pull up and show off a little bit.
Yes, sure.
I know you've done
Bruce,
some
do you have any requests, Bruce?
Go right ahead.
I wasn't going to directly throw it out there, but since you've done some other work with Bruce that was not Mystara, if you had a little bit of that you wanted to show off, while Thorf is pulling that up, yeah. While Thorf is pulling that up, just a quick plug here. So Bruce is back with us tonight to talk sort of the glory days of Mystara with the show later this evening. But part of what we're also going to talk about in there is not just Mystara. We want to give Bruce a chance to talk about Calidar and some of the current work that he's doing as well. So tonight, when you come back later to say hi to Bruce and have an after-dinner cocktail while watching him do his thing, and Thorf may be joining us for that one also, after you get a good night's sleep. It'll be a chance to talk a little about Calidar as well as Mystara. So you get a chance to cover both there a little bit.
Wonderful.
We weren't going to bring Bruce in and not give him a chance to show off the current stuff he's working on.
Thank you.
That would have been mean. But we absolutely want to give a chance to talk a little bit of the Calidar stuff as well. So, Thorf, have I filled enough time here? We got something loading?
We do indeed. Chugging away.
We're working on it.
Chug. Nothing that we did recently in Calidar is actually small.
Let's go back to Ann's point here of, hey, so somebody needs to set up the GoFundMe to help Thorf boost some computer power. So.
He needs a computer that has a guy chained to a post above it with a guitar, and he's playing madly, and there's flames shooting out from pipes on the sides, and
I don't know if that's going to make the computer run any faster, though. That's the
challenge. But it would be so cool.
Oh, it would absolutely be cool. I think we need to get Thorf a couple extra hamsters to work inside the computer there. Get the wheels spinning a little faster.
Digital hamsters. Yay.
While Thorf is pulling that stuff up, does anybody in the crowd have some questions that they want to ask that don't involve him having to pull something up on screen? The Machine of Lum.
Yes, right, exactly. Machine of Lum the Mad.
I was sort of thinking the guitar car from the most recent Mad Max movie.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too.
So, well,
there's the huge machine on the Blackmore module cover. The one that has a yellow background around it, the yellow frame.
Yeah.
It's got big, huge flames coming out of pipes on the sides.
So, Sean had asked this question earlier. We're going to pull it back up here because you don't have to show this one to ask. Small scale maps, the width of the rivers, but how do you deal with that when you're making those larger scale maps? I mean, if you've ever seen the Mississippi River, it's a big flipping river, but at a certain point you zoom out, it's just a blue line on the map.
Exactly.
I have to say, Sean's usage of the word small scale and large scale are spot on, which makes sense because that's his line of work. So I'm not at all surprised. A lot of people get these the wrong way around. The simple answer is that you have to make them thinner when you zoom in. If you zoom in a long way, right? I mean, you can't have all the rivers in the world being miles wide. There might be a few which are, but it's not all.
Yeah, it's a depiction more than an accurate scaled river. I had the same problem when I was designing city maps. Really, how wide do I want that street to show on the map at the scale that the city is represented? And I had to go back and forth and try to figure out exactly how many pixel wide that street was. So, and how many feet is that in reality? And how does that compare with a real world city? Yeah, it's a pain.
Well, one of the things that might help with some of that reference today, a tool that we have today that we certainly didn't have 40 years ago, is you can pull up you can pull up Google Maps and put it in satellite view and zoom in and out and see at what point some of those details start to become discernible. Bruce mentioned the machine on the front of
there,
the Black
computer.
Module, so there we go.
Oh, very cool.
There you go.
Zoom.
That's the one you're looking for there.
That's in turbo mode.
So I happen to know right where this one was here in my office, so it was very easy to go grab.
Yeah, I gotta kind of have to dig around to find anything around here. But
that's not normal for my office. That one I happen to know where that.
Oh, good. Okay,
that magazine box was. No. There's my especially as we get into the holidays, because my office is removed from the main part of the house. You have to go out through the garage to a back set of steps to get up to my office up over the garage. Especially when the holidays get here, my office becomes the gift wrapping office, and so I lose my game table to a mountain of Christmas wrap. So that becomes a bit more of a challenge. So I think Thorf's bouncing between machines here to try and pull something up.
Indeed. Sorry, it might take a second to get it worked out.
So, Sean, to close the loop some on that how do you scale those things? Lance had the good suggestion of treat them as center lines, and so that's certainly one possibility. But there's also the idea of going, I would say take a look at Google Maps and zoom in and out and see at what point different things become discernible as actual features that have some real width and breadth and take up space on the ground versus things that you just kind of need a line to represent the fact that they're there. But even that line itself might be out of scale for how far out you're zooming. That might be the way to work. So Josh, I sure hope you're not referring to me, because I'm just the Yups running the talk show here. So Ann's got a very good point here. Rivers do change course over the years.
Oh yeah.
Sometimes intentionally. Like if anybody's ever been to Chicago, they turned the river around and made it flow the other direction. So
they turned it green too.
Yes. Yeah. They and in Cleveland they set them on fire. So.
Oh wow.
Well, there was a chemical spill in the Cuyahoga River one year that caught on fire.
Caught fire. Oh geez.
Yeah, that was fun. It was such a Cleveland sort of thing. So.
How's that for you, Brant?
You want me to pull that other screen up? All right, let's do that.
Can you manage?
Let me pull this one out. We'll put this one in. Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah, that'll do the job.
All right.
Yeah.
There we go. So this is Bruce's World of Calidar that is the current project that he's working on. And again, you'll have plenty of opportunity to pester Bruce with questions on Calidar tonight on the later panel, but wanted to give Thorf a chance to sort of show off some of the map making that he had done here for Calidar.
That's actually the known world of Calidar. There we go. We're currently working on the northwest portion that is labeled Confederacy of Alfdine.
Okay.
So that got blown up into a map scaled at 10 miles per hex, and that required how many pages of maps? Is the atlas in the book is what 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 pages, right?
Jonathan, yes, it is.
Yeah, 9 pages. Just barely cover the whole area of Alfdine.
So,
oh boy.
If you give me a second,
you're developing,
I'll bring up the new map. I'll be a second. Go ahead.
As you're developing the look and feel of Calidar here and some of the mapping that you're doing for Bruce now, look, for a lot of us, we hear Bruce's name and the first thing we're thinking of is Mystara. Obviously, you're wanting to break some of those connections and not just turn this into a reboot of Mystara, because that's not what this is. This is a new thing. But how did you walk that tightrope between, I need to create a new thing, but I don't want to alienate the fans that know Bruce from this other, well-loved world and project?
Well, two things. First off, the style of the design is very similar to Mystara. It's me, basically.
Yeah.
Nobody else is writing for Calidar, so it's all very consistent. The other thing that I did was, from a spiritual standpoint, you still have a Greek empire, Byzantine Empire, you have an Elven kingdom, you have a Dwarven kingdom, you have the Middle Eastern type culture in the south where it turns yellow there. That's all desert-like, and so on and so forth. So it is somewhat similar as far as the general structure is concerned. You have a known world, and then if you go out, then it's wilderness. But that's about it. Once you get into the detail of each nation, then the dynamics are completely different, of course. There's one point I wanted to make about maps in general, not just Calidar, but maps of Mystara. It's the indexing of all the labels, because when you have such a huge map with so many places, so many rivers, so many mountains, so many towns, etc., you end up with hundreds, literally hundreds of labels. And of course, when I send my material over to a proofer, the first question out of his map is, well, you mentioned this town. I can't find it on your maps. There's so many maps. I don't know where to look for it. Oh, okay. Well, let me put together an index that tells you what page the name is on and where on the map it is, because even knowing what page that map is actually located on doesn't help. You actually have to tell the reader, look over there in the southeastern corner, kind of, and you'll find it.
Yeah,
so you have to coordinate between what the text says, what the index says, and what the map says in terms of spelling. Because spelling errors happen all the time. When I throw a label on a map, about a month or 2 months later, say, oh yeah, I remember this place. Type it up real quick in the manuscript, and there you go. You enter a typo because you thought there was an accent. Well, no, there is no accent. Or there is one, but it's on another letter, or it's not the same accent, or etc., etc., etc. So the poor proofer is going through the index one by one, verifying that this name in the index, which is published in the book, matches the label on the map. So yeah, good luck finding that. And then going back and searching the entire manuscript to make sure that all references to this label are spelled the same way. Wow. Yowza. It's a huge job.
Yeah, no, I absolutely. That I could totally see that being a very painful thing, but I think to your point, like if you recognize that issue up front and you build the index as you go, it's a lot easier to add 2 entries each day as you add them to the map than it is to have to go back and chase around 200 entries at once at the end of the week,
Yeah. And then from a design standpoint also, this is pretty. Remembering what labels you've actually used to make sure you don't duplicate the same name. Because when I design a product, it's going to take me months.
Yeah.
So, I like this name. I'm going to put it on this village. And then you realize, oh, no, I created that label elsewhere for some other place. Oh, I got to go back, cross it off.
I liked it so much.
Yeah, right. Invent another name. So now you have to become a little bit organized about how you create hundreds of names that kind of fit the culture. It's not just random names. There's actually some kind of rhyme or logic behind them. So
I think we need to re-up this suggestion from Anne. So there's a reason we booked a 2-hour show for this, right? We wanted to see 4 maps, But
there's a reason this was taking a long time. It's very big.
Yeah. It's a high level of detail. Now, I think Yeah, just here's a great suggestion from Ann. There you go. Just throw new in front of it. Or if you're doing German inspired, you add Ober or Unter or Neu or Alt. You just throw some so it becomes upper or lower. You know, there's all sorts of modifications you can make to place names there. I always thought that was fun in the old versions of the Civilization game. After a while, you would run out of the names for certain civilizations, so they'd start throwing new in front of them all. But then if you loop through all of those, then they'd start throwing newer in front of them all. So
US,
you had London, you had New London, and then you had newer London.
I never got that far.
I always got a laugh out of that. So
Future London coming soon.
Yeah,
over there.
London 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Oh yeah, regarding the index, of course, when you have such a huge index, you try to make sure it doesn't take too many pages in the book.
Yeah.
So you end up with what was it, 5-point type or 6-point type? What are we using for that? This is tiny.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Not big.
I had that conversation with a teacher one time back when I was in high school when most folks were still turning in handwritten 3-page essays for English class. I was typing mine because we had the computer at home. I was going to type stuff out. and at the time, people counted their essays in terms of pages, not words. You know, we need a 4-page essay. We need a 3-page essay. And at one point, you know, I'd ask the teacher, like, so how long are you actually looking for? And they said, well, you know, 3 or 4 pages. Like, look, it's a computer. I can make it fit whatever number of pages you want. You know, I can put 8 words on a page and give you a 4-page sentence, or I can put I can put it in 5-point type and I can give you a novel in 4 pages. Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
You will.
Hey.
All right.
We've got now. Zooming right in. That is actually 9 pages of maps.
Stitched together at once.
Yeah, all stitched together.
Yeah, this is the master map.
Right. So you see on the left side there are boxes labeled A, B, C, D, E. A, B, C, and D are 4 2-page spreads in the book. And E is only 1 page. You can see how D, which is the area depicted, is further subdivided into 6 areas, very understandably, northwest, north central, northeast, etc. And that's solely for use with the index, so you can actually find a place that's mentioned somewhere in the text without spending like 3 hours.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Just, I mean, if you figure how many little towns there are and how many forests, how many hills, how many rivers.
And they've all got a name.
And they all have a name. There are no duplicates.
And you can see the accents here.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yep. No, that's a fascinating level of detail. I really like the look of the mountains and the hills there. That's definitely an impressive look.
Yeah, that's a different style. I like it very much. It's really, really cool. Look at that.
Well, and you know, to folks that are map geeks like me, one of the things that you immediately notice different between this and the Mystara style of maps is that you have the terrain that expands beyond the hex borders. If you go back to the Mystara style of map, you have a mountain icon in every single mountain hex, whereas here, those things spread across the hex lines. And it's neither is right or wrong. It's just a different style of map.
Different style.
Obviously, the style of map with the icons inside the hex was pretty dominant back in the old manual paste up days, because you had those icons that you could cut, paste, and repeat by manually sticking them to the map. This was a little different. style of creating those maps. So.
Thorfinn has gotten really good at taking a map like that and turning it into old style hex-based symbols.
Yeah,
we've done a number of those actually.
Yeah. So Bruce, as we're looking at the map there,
Torf is trying to say something, and I think we lost audio with him.
He muted himself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Sorry, my headphones decided to conk out.
Oh, we can hear you a lot better too.
That's good. We don't have a hex map for this one yet, do we?
No, we don't. Oh, good God. No way. Yeah, this one's huge.
Yeah, it is. It is a bit.
So Bruce, as Thorf is showing off a lot of these locations in your new material, like there's something in the text for all of these locations also at this point, though, right?
For at least the most important ones, yeah. The whole area is covered in one way or the other.
Okay.
Yeah, this is actually 3 different kingdoms that form a confederacy.
Okay. So
each kingdom is treated separately. It has a different ruling system. It has different characters, different things, different style, Yeah. So it's not like just a huge geographic area with just a little bit talked about in one corner and the rest of it is up to the reader. No. This is all very carefully detailed.
We don't want to steal too much of the thunder from tonight's show here,
Well, I don't know. I mean, how many people are on this show who won't be on the evening one and vice versa?
I don't know. We've hovered around 20 or so live viewers for this one, which isn't bad for this show.
Yeah.
And a lot of the names we'll recognize just because they've been in several of these shows, but they're sticking with us, and a couple of them are coming back tonight. So yeah, I was just when Thorf, as you're developing the look and feel for this one, how much of this is, hey, I really like this thing, let me put it in here and see what Bruce thinks? How much of it is, hey, Bruce found something that he really likes and brought it to me and said, hey, use this kind of style? How much of it is you just winging it and hope he doesn't hate it?
Oh, there's a bit of both, right?
Most of the details are already in when I turn them over to Thorfinn, because when you're writing a product that is that detailed, you better make sure that it's all on the map to begin with. You can't just throw in something, then I have to go back and realize, does that work with the manuscript? Did it say something about this place? So you try to avoid as much as possible retrofitting cool ideas.
Yeah. I was thinking less so much the actual places on the map than more the style of the map, the way in which the mountains and hills look, the way in which certain things are marked, and the symbols that are used, and the typography, and like the
actual
the lines around the coast that sort of indicate where we're going.
That is entirely Thorfinn's rendering. I have very little to do with the actual look of the map. All I do is provide all of the outlines, the roads, the rivers, the cities, all the tags, all that stuff.
The symbols.
But pardon me?
And the symbols too.
Some of those weird symbols I tried to design, but most of the graphic, the way stuff looks, that is all Thorfinn. That is his art. That is his technique.
We kind of worked through most of that already back in 2013, 2014 for the first one. And after that, it's just sort of, I don't know, adding little bits and pieces onto the plan to get new things to work.
Yeah. I didn't know how much of it was, when you guys were first starting to work on some of this, if Bruce had brought you a half a dozen maps and said, I really like the look of these, or I really don't want something that looks like this, versus how much of it was you just starting to do something and having Bruce, offer suggestions as you went. I've seen people work in both ways, and that's why I was kind of curious how the process evolved with you guys.
Thorfinn has done a lot. Go ahead.
Organic. Would you say it was quite organic towards the beginning?
Yeah, it was pretty organic, but mostly you're the one who came up with the looks and say, hey, how do you like that? And I would answer, I kind of like it. Maybe you can change this or change that. then he'd come up with a different version, and so on. There were many different iterations of the original maps until we settled with something that both of us, really felt good about. And basically we stuck with that for consistency reasons. We stuck with that. I'm really happy with the way things are coming out. So yeah, fortunately it's just the two of us. It's not like when you work in a big company where, this time you have a different mapper with different ideas and different techniques, and stuff ends up looking completely different. And that's a problem. So as far as consistency, that's really important.
That's good. That's good.
So this one here is the hex version of one of the Calidar ones. So we deliberately kind of made it slightly different from what we were used to, but also quite similar.
I mean, you're redoing an existing map in a completely different style that doesn't match what else exists. Were you just bored, or did you lose a bet, or how did you end up doing this?
You mean having two different styles of map?
Yeah,
my fault.
Well, why wouldn't you?
I told him to. I said, I want the artful version, but for this type of map, I want the hex version. Thank you, Bruce.
Wait, but I don't understand. I mean, why not? Why not 3? Why not 4?
Well, 2 is plenty.
Let's go back to how many hours exist in a day and how long it takes you to even open them, much less work on them.
Well, usually to solve the opening thing, you can just go and make a cup of tea. Yeah. And enforce the breaks.
Yeah. God. So, Thorp, let me ask, you've done a ton of work with this Mystara style of map, and that was kind of the key shtick of most of this show anyway. Is there something around this style that was the look and feel of these maps was established long before you ever started working on those maps? Is there something in that map style that you have carried forward, but that you would have done pretty differently had it been you back at the start of those maps? There's something in there that just drives you nuts and you wish you could change it, but it's too late now because it's been 35 years.
Well, if I was going to make hexes now, I would definitely want to tie the hex terrain types with biomes.
Okay.
I mean, explicitly tie them with biomes so that each hex, represents a biome rather than sort of abstract terrain. Because one of the things that kind of is difficult to do with hexes is, for example, the northern terrain versus the southern terrain. I mean, it all started out with a single forest hex, right? So originally there weren't even coniferous deciduous. It was just the one oak tree, and even if it was at the equator or at the North Pole, it would still be one oak tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've the system's had many things grafted onto it in the many years since then, 30-something years probably. But yeah, it's not 30, it's 40, isn't it? Sorry, 40-something years. Yeah. In the 40-something years since then, it's it's wow.
But thanks for making us all feel old there, Thorf.
In a lot of maps out there, you can tell that the focus is definitely not on climate and therefore biomes. A lot of people forget that, and I think it's pretty important. If you go out there and you're trying to run an outdoor adventure, you need to know about climate, weather, biomes, things like that. And to make it consistent, it has to be set up properly in a gazetteer or whatever background information you have.
The other thing that we have not managed to solve to my satisfaction is forested mountains. And I live in a place where literally all of the mountains are forested. So in northern Japan, if you look at the maps, I mean, it's green. The whole place is dark green. There's basically no bare mountain at all. But on the map, if I just show you here, in Calidar we have these marked in, and so we have, this is a mountain peak, and then you have the sort of bare mountains or more bare mountains, and then these are forested mountains. But if you just look at it visually, your eye can't see the mountain range if you have it like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, you have to go one way or the other. And we tried various things with having like different mixes of browns and greens, or a brown hex with a green trees in it, and unfortunately, it just doesn't look good.
Yeah.
So, but there's no really good way to represent this yet that I've been able to find.
Well, with a hex-based system, it's very hard.
Yeah.
With the art maps that you do, though, the question is not quite a problem there, because you can see the color of the mountains is changing from green to brown, and you can still very clearly tell that's a mountain. This over here looks more like a hill.
Yeah. One of the
There
other
you
things
go.
that you lose in the hex maps that are much easier to represent in the art style maps is not just what kind of hills or mountains you've got there, but the relative contour of some of those hills and mountains. And the example that I always give folks is people that have lived on the East Coast are used to some pretty high mountains, but ones that climb fairly gradually. Whereas if you go out in California along some of the coastal range of mountains, some of those aren't super high, but they're very steep along the edges. They're pretty sharp the way they drop off right around the side. And as a guy that's driven, Army Humvees up and down some of those hills out in California, trust me, there's some pretty sharp, harrowing drops off of some of those things. That's, on a hex map, those are still just hills, regardless of what kind of foliage you got on. They're still just hills, but they're very different kinds of hills, and they're tougher to represent in a hex map versus an art style map. Now, depending on the scale of map you're doing, it may be completely irrelevant, but there may be times where it is relevant, and you ought to want to depict those separately, one way or the other. So, yeah, DJ.
Well, on the hex map, I mean, it all just comes down to imagination.
Yeah.
So when you look at the mountain hex, what you have to remember is it might not even be full of mountains. I mean, there could be a single lone mountain in the middle of the hex, which is the most important thing in the hex, and that makes it a mountain hex. Yeah. Alternatively, it could be a huge massif where the entire hex is crammed full of mountains. And as you say, it could be like really high mountains or low mountains, or very steep mountains, or just gentle mountains, and it's all the same mountain hex.
Yeah, so, I mean, you have to realize the hex system goes back to X1, which provides a very simple system for players to record topography. So it's black and white. It's just a little inverted V for a mountain. It's a little inverted U for a hill, and it's a little round thing for a forest, etc., which is very practical for day-to-day adventuring. Of course, we've turned this into the gazetteer maps, and that's where we run into the problems that Thorf is mentioning, that we try to get a little bit more sophisticated, but therein lies the problem. That's the limitation of the hex map. It has a symbol, one size fits all, and it doesn't always work very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, folks, we're approaching the end of our 2 hours here that we've asked for, especially for Thorf being up like at midnight his time and everything. For Bruce, me and Bruce, this is not vampire hours for the two of us, but Thorf is cutting into bedtime here. So I do want to thank them both greatly for joining us on this cartography talk, and especially thank the audience for sticking around with us here.
Thank you very much.
Bruce is back tonight at 7 Eastern, 6 Central, whatever time that is in Japan, if Thorf's going to be awake again to join us.
Breakfast time.
Yep. With turn the clock around.
Yeah, there you go. Flip the clock around. So that'll give you a chance to come back around and have a chat about the glory days of Mystara tonight, and then Bruce dig in a little more to Calidar. We've already got a couple of questions that popped up today that folks are going to save for later tonight to bring back to you tonight, Bruce. So I hope folks are having a good time with Mystara. We've got to bounce out of here because we're about to have another show start in just a couple minutes with Glenn and the guys who worked on the 5E player's guide for Mystara. So
Great stuff.
We're gonna throw that YouTube link up in the Discord here in just a minute for folks to find that one if they want to jump in there and see that. And otherwise, Bruce, thank you very much for being here. Thorf, thank you very much for being here. And audience, thank you very much for being here. We definitely appreciate you guys joining us. And we'll do this all again later tonight.
Yay.
And next year.
And next year. Sure.